Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We are pleased to welcome back to the Volpe Report the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, the Honorable Austin Davis. We also enjoy interviewing historical figures who break glass ceilings. And Lieutenant Governor Davis is the youngest lieutenant governor in the country and the first black lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania history. And he was the youngest ever elected at age 33 to become lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania. I'd say that breaks a glass ceiling. Governor Davis grew up in a working family from McKeesport, Pennsylvania, a former steel town near Pittsburgh. His mom was a hairdresser for more than 40 years, and his dad was a union bus driver. At age 16, believe it or not, he began his public service career when he started a youth advisory council with the mayor of McKeesport, as well as a youth gun violence prevention program at his high school. This was the result of a shooting near his home in his neighborhood that he unfortunately saw from too close a distance. And he saw what the results of gun violence can do when they come to your very doorstep. Governor Davis attended McKeesport Area High School, and he then went on to receive his Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from the University of Pittsburgh, becoming the first in his family to receive a bachelor's degree. He then joined the staff of a personal friend of mine, a numerous guest on this show, Allegheny County Executive Rich Fitzgerald. In 2018, Austin was elected to the House of Representatives, representing the Mon Valley. His meteoric rise culminated with his election to become the historic lieutenant governor in 2022. In addition to presiding over the Senate, he is the president of Senate by virtue of his position. Governor Davis chairs the Board of Pardons and is the chair of the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Council. And particularly relevant to today's show, he serves as a chair of the Pennsylvania Commission on Crimes and Delinquency. He is a resident of Allegheny County, and he and his wife Blair have a daughter. He and his wife Blair, the Second Lady of Pennsylvania, recently championed a program to improve the child care workforce in Pennsylvania.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you for joining the Volpe Report. It's good to see you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. I know we talked briefly, as I usually do with my guests, off camera, and I was making the comment, I can't even get to all of the things you have been very busy doing for our Commonwealth. So first of all, my appreciation on behalf of taxpayers for all the work you're doing across myriad. It's not limited to one area. In fact, I'll say, probably you still get a runner-up, though. I'm not sure anybody could match what President Trump has done in terms of record-breaking executive orders, and every week there's something new going on. Well, when I went through the research for this interview with you today, you're not far behind. You've done an awful lot so far, and so as I said, it's appreciated. It makes my job easier because I can just pretty much tee them up and get an education myself along with all the folks in Pennsylvania. Let's get to one of them right now. It's the VCAP program, and what VCAP stands for is the Victims Compensation Assistance Program. This program was done a couple years ago. A pretty significant amount of money was put in, but it's run low already. So you put another, I believe it's $9 million in the current governor's budget to kind of push it back up again. So talk about VCAP. What does the Victims Assistance Compensation Program deal with?
Yeah, it is really a lifeline for victims who are victims of a violent crime. If you think of somebody who, had a family member, a husband or a son or a daughter who shot and killed their funeral expenses are a big factor that those family members weren't anticipating. Sometimes the cleanup costs from a crime scene, and so this program provides support to victims to help offset the costs that are related to the crime that they suffered. And it's been a lifeline in all of Pennsylvania's 67 counties. I think since the beginning of the program, we've spent north of $60 million helping victims to heal and recover. And it's extremely important because we know that hurt people hurt people. And we need to make sure that when somebody is a victim of a violent crime, we're doing everything we can to help them heal and get back to being productive members of society. And this is a lifeline.
It's brilliant because until I read about it and the investment you've made, it's common sense in a way because, look, the gated upper end communities, the high income earners, they're not a violent crime going on in their communities. It's in the lower end neighborhoods, the lower end of the economic gene pool, the folks that are on public assistance or in poor neighborhoods where, you get other illegal often ways of earning money because they don't have enough money. Well, that's where crime shows up. It goes, whether it's in drug deals or other things. So victims, innocent people who have no, part of criminal activity get injured. There's gangs we talked about off air. We'll talk about more. I know in the Scranton area, we have a gang problem. There's random shootings into people's homes. So this would be a lifeline for people, for hospitals and for medical expenses and other related, God forbid, funeral expenses. And this program covers that. That's correct?
Yeah, I was in Pittsburgh last week doing a press conference on this very subject at the Center for Victims. And I met a woman who had lost 2 children to gun violence and how this program was a lifeline to help make sure that she was able to bury her son with dignity, that she was able to provide. I think her son was killed around Christmas time, to make sure she was able to keep her home stable for the other children that she had. And I've heard stories like that all across Pennsylvania. And we need to make sure that people who've experienced a very traumatic event are supported and have the resources that they need. That doesn't make their situation even worse. I can't even imagine. I'm the father of a young daughter, and I can't imagine the pain that some of those parents have to go through, or some of the other victims have to go through. But I think the governor and I, recognize that we need to be supporting these individuals as a part of a comprehensive approach to reduce violence in our communities. And I know we talked earlier about the things that we're doing in terms of after-school programs, in terms of violence intervention and prevention grant programs, in terms of more resources for local law enforcement to be able to do the job that they're tasked with doing in our communities effectively. We've really taken a comprehensive approach, and I think what you've seen is violent crime has dropped 16% in Pennsylvania. That's greater than the national average. And I think that's in no small part to the investments that we've made in VCAP and all these other programs. And I think we have to continue. Now is not the time to take our foot off of the gas. We need to continue to make these investments to make Pennsylvania's communities safer.
I've read here about and it is right here, that you have just announced over $11 million in state grants for the Shapiro-Davis Administration to strengthen after-school programs for Pennsylvania youth. $11 million. So would you talk a little bit about that? Because look, like we talked about off camera, constructive after-school programs for kids to direct them and channel them into something that will help them grow and mature and stay safe. If you can do both of those things at the same time and keep them out of the gangs and stuff like that, because that's like a siren call that a lot of them hear. So, yeah, talk about that $11 million in that program.
I grew up in McKeesport in southwestern Pennsylvania and spent a lot of time at the Boys and Girls Club there. It was really a safe space for me to play sports, but also to do my homework, to get help, to make sure that I had somewhere to go. I was one of those kids that both parents were working after school. I had to figure out either I was going to be at home or I was going to be at the Boys and Girls Club. And thank God that safe place was there for me. We need to make sure that every young person across Pennsylvania has access to a high quality after school program. The governor and I last year, for the first time ever, put $10 million in the state's budget for the building opportunity through out of school time, the Boost program, as we like to call it, to make sure that young people have safe places to go in their community that is helping them further their education, giving them recreational opportunities, and the ability to connect with mentors. This has been a wildly successful program. And to give you an example, when we opened the grant program, we had $10 million. We got over $65 million in funding requests for these dollars all across Pennsylvania. Clearly, communities are looking for programs like this, which is why in the upcoming budget, the governor and I have proposed doubling our initial investment in the Boost program to a little over $20 million to make sure that we can have more programs across Pennsylvania for our young people. I think this is an example of us investing in young people to keep them off the streets, to keep them out of trouble, but to also give them a nurturing, rich environment where they can flourish.
Yeah, that it's wonderful. Hooray. And as I said, ironically, that roundtable that I hosted up here, we'll talk maybe a little more about that in a second, with the state police head of the gang task force, the district attorney in Lackawanna County, Brian Gallagher, and your former colleague in the General Assembly, and my good friend Marty Flynn, Pennsylvania senator. He had just brought money from your administration that you and Governor Shapiro had made available in a program to deal with, and it was focused not the program was about gang violence. We just had a lieutenant in Scranton Police Detectives shot twice in the head by a young 17-year-old gang member a year ago in Scranton, which is why I hosted that show. But the money, there was money for law enforcement, clearly, but a big chunk of it went to after-school programs and other things that you're talking about to keep these kids from getting into gang in the first place. So
yeah, we need to make sure that we're giving young people safe spaces. When I was a kid, we had Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, many programs for young people to go to, and we have seen over the years, as budgets have gotten tight, we've seen many of those programs go away or have to consolidate. And this is our way of supporting these young people, supporting these programs that are doing good work in the community. And it's going to have amazing results.
Well, I don't know if I mentioned to you in the last show, you just triggered my memory. When you get old like me, it's always good to have these tests. But at any rate, Governor, both of my children, my boys, I have 3 children, 1 girl and 2 boys. And you remember I was a resident of Pittsburgh for about 10 years. And when they were much younger, both of them played baseball, Farm League and Little League at the Shady Side Boys and Girls Club. So I could echo what you're describing.
I mean, the Shady Side Boys and Girls Club in Pittsburgh is legendary.
Yeah, I know.
There are more elected officials and famous NFL and NBA players who have come out of the Shady Side Boys and Girls Club probably than any other Boys and Girls Club in the country. But it has created a great following. Just last week, I was at the Boys and Girls Club of Western Pennsylvania. They did their awards banquet, and they gave me their Alumni of the Year award.
Congratulations.
For my around Boost. But, it's just everybody has that story of a safe place that they went that poured into them. And we need to make sure that young people continue to have those experiences so they're not turning to crime or getting caught up in things that aren't productive for them or our society. And the governor and I both are parents to young children and understand the importance of it. And so we're going to continue to fight for these programs. And one of the things that I've recognized is that this has been a bipartisan effort. I worked with Senator Schlegel-Culver, a Republican state senator, with Representatives Mike Schlossberg and Liz Fiedler, 2 Democrats in the House, to bring this program to fruition. And it's a great example of what can happen when we take off our red jerseys and our blue jerseys and put on the Pennsylvania jersey, and we all work together for the common good of our great Commonwealth.
Well, I like to think in a small way, Governor, that we're doing that right now. I was a Democrat for 45 years. I ran for governor of Pennsylvania myself in the 90s as a Democrat. I hope we're showing as an example there can be collegiality and respect for, I may disagree with you on some issues, but you're a hell of a public servant. I knew you from way back when. Your job has been to help people, which is what public service is all about. And I'm willing to bet, I like to say I was a John F. Kennedy Democrat. I'm willing to say that we agree on a lot more stuff than we probably disagree on. But I come from an era, because I said I'm old, when you could even strongly disagree in chambers and then go have a beer and dinner across the street. As I said, we're showing, I hope, how people talk about all the important things you do and not the few things that we disagree about, hopefully, going forward.
Yeah. I think people want government leaders to get results for them and their families, right? I think people are tired of kind of hearing the political rhetoric and the posturing that comes out of Washington and sometimes comes out of Harrisburg. And my focus has always been on getting stuff done. And I recognize the community that sent me to Harrisburg as a state representative in 2018 was a working class community that, had a lot of big problems and quite frankly, didn't care about the political fights, was more concerned about whether I was delivering funding for good schools, economic development projects that created jobs, and resources that created safer communities. And I think that's always been my guiding star as long as I've been a public servant. And I think that's what people want. And that's what I hear as I travel all across the Commonwealth.
No question. But anyway, we have, believe it or not, blown through more than half of the show. So we'll take a quick moment break for some commercials, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the other things. The issue you raised a little bit earlier, I want to talk about the gun violence. I want to talk about your program that you and your wife are engaged in for child care and the issue we face in Pennsylvania. I've already raised the issue of we don't have enough housing. Well, once we get the housing and families and multifamily structures built, those folks are going to probably need child care if they want to go to work. So we'll be right back, Governor.
There are more places you can watch the Volpe Report, your premier political talk show. Tune in to Fox 56 every Sunday morning at 10:30 as we bring prominent national and state officials right into your living room. Or watch on YouTube at the Volpe Report, where you get full access to all of our episodes, wherever you are. Our guests are the newsmakers, the decision makers, the people who shape the policies that affect us all. We dive deep into what matters most to Pennsylvanians with in-depth interviews that give you the full picture. We're dedicated to providing you with unfiltered, thought-provoking conversations. Whether it's local policy, national politics, or everything in between, we're right here to break it down and keep you informed. So wherever you want to watch, the Volpe Report is always here for you, delivering everything you need to know in today's political landscape.
Welcome back, Governor. And we will now go and turn our attention to, you made various references, as I did, about the after-school program. But one of the things that impacts everybody in Pennsylvania is gun violence. And you and the governor, Shapiro, have announced, and I want to get this right, $56.5 million in grant funding to combat gun violence and create more after-school, out-of-school opportunities. We've talked about that part, but you have a boost program. You also have the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, the PCCD, a big chunk of money, $56.5 million went there, and now I guess there's $11.5 million investment in the boost and $10 million in funding for the successful gun violence intervention and prevention program. So let's start with the gun violence intervention and protection program. Talk a little bit about that and why you're funding gun violence prevention.
Yeah, look, I got my calling to public service when I was 16 years old, and there was an incident of gun violence in my neighborhood. That really shattered the foundation of safety and security for me, and it's been the issue that I've worked on throughout my entire career. The resources that we spend through the Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant Program invests in community-based organizations who are doing day-to-day work in our communities to eliminate gun violence. We recognize that we're going to have to take a comprehensive approach to taking on gun violence, and we do that from funding law enforcement to make sure they have the resources that they need, but also making sure that community-based organizations have the resources that they need to go into communities to interrupt violence. And we have seen a phenomenal return on our investment that Violent crime is down in Pennsylvania by 16%. It's lower than the national average. We need to continue to make these investments to keep our communities safe. It's a part of a larger strategy that we have as an administration to take on gun violence. I'm proud that one of the first things the governor did was appoint me to chair the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency to make sure that I'm working every day to make sure Pennsylvania's communities are safe. I'm really proud of the fact that we're standing up the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention here in the Commonwealth to make sure that we are coordinating all of our resources to take on this issue. And so we've made significant progress. The numbers bear that out, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Sure. Well, again, it's so necessary, and it just seems to me there are certain problems I have found in my lifetime. I don't think they're forever problems. They're problems that we have to manage, and there'll never be a black and white solution. Like whether you want to talk about like the issue of abortion and right to life. Those are two forces that will always kind of be pushing against each other, and our best hope is that our elected officials and leaders manage it. Sometimes maybe that'll tip a little bit toward life, pro-life. Sometimes it'll tip a little bit more for pro-choice, but it'll always be there. Well, gun violence is the same issue. It's a different issue, but similar in this regard. You're going to always have the people who want their guns. Second Amendment, the National Rifle Association. That's always going to be a powerful interest. And yet, on the other side, I think most civilized, society understands there have to be limits, who can get them, and we have to put limits on guns because obviously guns kill. So there's going to always be, Governor, to me, that push back and forth between putting funding appropriately into gun violence and intervention in education, but yet, there'll always be the forces that push back and say, yeah, but, I have a constitutional right to my guns, and I need to be able to protect my home and my family. So it's good. We need you doing what you're doing in gun violence. And as I said, to me, that'll be an issue that never goes away. Whoever's in power may put more emphasis one way or the other, but no power, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, will ever win the issue, for lack of a better word. I think that's an issue that we're going to have to manage for a long time.
Well, I'll say this. I don't think anybody, certainly in our administration, the governor or I wants to take the guns away from law-abiding citizens. The reality is we think some common sense reform will make our community safer, like universal background checks, like red flag laws for folks who are in mental health crises, to making sure that if your gun is lost or stolen, that you're reporting it to law enforcement. And these are proposals that the state house has passed and sent to the state Senate that they've quite frankly sat on for 2 years. But these are also proposals that are supported by law enforcement all across the Commonwealth. I think, we don't want to take anybody's right to own and bear arms, but we also don't want to take away somebody's right to life and to make sure that they have the opportunity to live a violent-free society. So I think we can come together. And by the way, I'd note that these bills passed the House of Representatives on a bipartisan basis.
Yes.
So we've seen Democrats and Republicans come together in the state house. And my hope is that the Senate will move sooner rather than later. But one of the things that I have as an elected official, and I think any responsibility any elected official has, is to make sure our constituents are safe. And I think everything that we are doing is taking a comprehensive approach to making sure Pennsylvania's communities are safer.
Agreed, Governor. And it the narrative, that's what I'm saying. You're doing, we're very similar in a lot of your programs, they said, even me, as I speak personally, and it's just going to be one of those issues that we have to manage as best we can. I think you're doing a good job. I like and support some of your programs, for example, that I've read about. These issues are not going away. I applaud you for your efforts. And now I would like to talk about something, because I've had you on the show a couple of times, and I would be remiss if we did one more without your lovely wife, who I've never had the pleasure of meeting, and she is the second lady, I should say, is Blair Holmes Davis, and I've seen obviously pictures, so you're a lucky man, Governor. But the issue is investments for child care workforce. That's a big issue we face in Pennsylvania and nationally. And like the child tax credit is always debated in Congress, and the presidents have talked about putting it in their budgets. So back to here in Pennsylvania, talk a little bit about your program and what you'd like to see happen there, and her program.
So my wife and I are new parents. We have an 18-month-old daughter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we are certainly, our daughter is in daycare. And so the only reason I can sit here today is because of the child care that we are able to receive as a family. But there are about 3,000 unfilled child care worker positions all across Pennsylvania. And it's not just critical to Pennsylvania's working families, it's critical to our economy to make sure that parents have the ability to be good parents, but also to contribute to our society and our economy through their jobs and their participation. And so my wife and I have done a series of roundtables around the Commonwealth. We were did a roundtable in Pittsburgh with the governor. We were in Blair County at Sheetz headquarters, talking with employers who have worked to provide childcare for their employees or offset it. And we have seen some tremendous programs. Sheetz is an amazing program. They've partnered with Brightside to have a childcare facility on their campus, their headquarters for their employers. The Allegheny County Airport is another employer that's leading with providing childcare for their workers on their facility. The governor and I have put forward a number of proposals, and in this year's budget, we're proposing a $1,000 recruitment and retention bonus for childcare workers to get people into the field, to say that we value and recognize the work that you do, not just contribute to Pennsylvania families, but our economy as a whole. And that builds on the things that we've done, like expanding the child tax credit here in Pennsylvania, and working to make sure that we're creating an ecosystem that supports Pennsylvania families. And I think this is an area that has seen significant bipartisan cooperation. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to get this enacted in Pennsylvania's next budget.
Well, I think that's a wonderful program. Regrettably, Governor, believe it or not, a half hour, we just blew through it. And I want to thank you for not only for doing the show, but for doing the good work you're doing. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, I have done views on this show when the acrimony between the Democrats and Republicans were at all-time highs, and both parties were more engaged in name-calling the dialogue. And I had said then, our country will only thrive when both parties can agree to disagree on issues and get both parties kind of between the 40s, to use a football analogy, instead of between the 10s, which where it seems to be. And you and I having these dialogues. John Fetterman, who I did not support, but who I've learned to have a great deal of respect for, because he's saying, wait a minute, how can you have a position unless you hear what the other side's position was? You can't shout people down. So keep up the good work you're doing for Pennsylvania. And you are doing some wonderful things. And those are the things that we should be talking about. And I'm glad I had a chance to do that today.
Well, thank you, Chuck. And I look forward to catching up with you when I'm back up in northeastern PA.
Today. Look forward to it, Governor. Have a good day. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.